Court is now in session.
All rise. This is Order in the Court, an inside look into college basketball on the West Coast with veteran announcer Ted Robinson and the Pac-12's all-time leading scorer Don MacLean. So please be seated. Order in the Court. Here now are Ted and Don.
Welcome, everybody, and it's our season finale of Order in the Court because we've turned it into March. Of course, it's tournament time, conference first, and then, of course, March Madness coming up. Don, for Oregon State and Washington State, for Washington State, actually, the season end they needed. They won both games last weekend. They get the 6th seed in the WCC tournament. They're hoping they don't play Pacific because Pacific beat them both times in the regular season. Oregon State had a heartbreaking loss at home to San Francisco. And then, of course, they couldn't handle, as no one could, St. Mary's. So Oregon State gets 5 seed in the WCC tournament. But as we did last week, Don, for Oregon State, still 20 wins for Wayne Tinkle. Hats off on the year.
First of all, Ted, is it true that when you get older, the season goes by faster? Because it seems like these seasons just keep flying by. Like the season just started and here we are wrapping it up. But yeah, right. Look, we've talked all year about Wayne and the job he's done and how he not finally, but in the last couple of years, this is his team and a team that he likes and a team that he constructed, and they had a good amount of success. I think it's really interesting, and I think it's fair to think, what if there still had been the old Pac-12, where would Oregon State have finished? Where would Washington State have finished if the league was still intact? I think it's kind of ironic that they finished right next to each other in 5th and 6th place in the WCC, but I think Oregon State, because of Washington State's injuries and things they've done, they have a chance to make a run. I'm not saying Washington State doesn't, but David Riley, I think for him, winning those last 2 games is important, to feel good about finishing off the regular season with some momentum going into the WCC tournament and finishing off their season the right way. So it's going to be an interesting WCC tournament for both those teams, but I really think that Oregon State can make a run. Let's see if they can do it.
Yeah. And I did speak to David Riley last week after we did our show, Don, and he confirmed what you said. Their door is wide open for Cedric Coward to come back. They suspect exactly what you laid out, that it's going to be tougher coming off an injury, but they're going to let him go through the workouts, see if he gets drafted, and then the door will be open for Cedric Coward to come back.
I tell every player, Ted, and obviously I'm really involved in the draft, everybody should test. Why wouldn't you? You're just getting information. You're getting high-level workouts against good players. You get the feedback, and then you make a decision. That date is usually the end of May, so you get a pretty good feel for where you're at. Like, you get enough time in front of teams that you'll have a good idea. But it's great that he has the option to come back because I think, like you just said, it's hard to go through the process with no film from this year. And especially coming off an injury like he had. Like, how good is he really going to be having not played in so long? So it'll be interesting. But he should test, but hopefully for Washington State he comes back.
All right. Well, we for our season finale, we thought we'd have a very special guest today for whom I wore this outfit. Don, remember this? Chip Kelly is so envious of me right now. I know Chip's getting enough in Las Vegas now. He'll get his own Raiders silver and black swag, but Chip loved this. I do think, though, as I think back, Don, the only clothing sponsor we never had in the history of the Pac-12 network was LeVar Ball's Big Baller brand. I think he's the only one.
He was too expensive. We couldn't afford it.
Well, last week I went into the Pac-12's beautiful studio. It really is a tremendous studio in San Ramon, California. And I walked in the door and I said, hey, would somebody show me the Oval Office? I want to see where all the decisions get made. And, I wanted to see Teresa Gould, our brilliant commissioner. I want to see Teresa's office. This person took me to Molinari's office. What were they thinking? God. And Michael Molinari is here with us. And of course, I say that with tongue very firmly planted in cheek. Michael, we all know, was a brilliant producer with us for years and years. And now, Don, he has the title SVP. That's big. And then being it's college athletics, they put 76 pieces of word salad after the SVP title. I have no idea. It's external, internal rotations and all this other stuff. Who the hell knows what that means? but the SVP part is important. So we thought that for this final episode, Michael would join us, and we will step out and look really at big picture stuff. And Michael, first, let's start with basketball because that's why we're here. The new conference, which is still to be finished, but the new conference, as we've all been so excited, of course, Gonzaga's edition was the home run, my personal opinion. I think many would agree. Basketball-wise, we could be having a heck of a lot of fun 2 years from now.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you one thing well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. To clear up a few things, without question, Teresa Gould is the one that makes all the decisions, just for clarity's sake. And I think Big Baller wasn't going to give us anything for free, so that's probably why we never had those jackets. So to clarify all that. But I think the thing that excites me the most about some of our new teams coming in are the environments that you go to. I've had a chance to I went down to San Diego State in late December for a thriller with Utah State. And that place was almost as loud as what formerly known as the Carrier Dome, where I went to Syracuse. So it was that loud with about half as many people. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was up in Logan, Utah, and I'll tell you what, that building is electric, and those students are into it from the tip to the final moments. And it was really exciting to see the enthusiasm of the buildings and the enthusiasm of the student body involved. So I think that's a great thing that we might have coming in with some of our new schools, and as you mentioned, oh, by the way, Gonzaga. So I think the great John Wilner had a study right now, old pack, new pack, comparing things with net rankings, that right now our conference would be, at least in his determination, a little bit higher than the new pack would be higher than the old pack as far as basketball power. So that was pretty exciting.
I think what would be interesting, Michael, in maybe the Cliff Notes version, it's probably a long story, but just to go back and how all this came about. And like most people that don't know, just thought the Pac-12 was left for dead, and who knows what Oregon State and Washington State are going to do. Kind of give us a sense of how it all came together to where we're at right now, looking ahead to this new Pac-12.
Well, I think when the announcement came that the old pack was dead, I think the one thing that nobody could argue with was there was a void for sports in the West. There was a void. What are we going to do with a great scene of sports in the West and the collegiate side? And I think what the new pack kind of leveraged was, how do we reform and get a West Coast, try to return some power to the West Coast college landscape? And I think that was attractive to a lot of the teams that ended up coming in. I know it had to be for Gonzaga for sure. And I think a lot of the Mountain West schools that came over thought this was an opportunity to build their brand, and to, especially I think people looked at the basketball as this is an opportunity to really start a new conference that, arguably in 5 to 10 years might look back and say, wow, this brand and this basketball power is maybe a little better than what we had in the Pac-12 a 2 or 3 years ago.
So Michael, from what you see as things regroup in the pack, and of course nationwide, who knows what's going to happen? How we all know football drove all this. My term, lunacy that we're going through. Okay, but now going forward, where does basketball factor in this equation?
Some people feel that basketball has been undervalued for a long time in the rights deals. Like, I think you could argue for certain on the women's side, the women's NCAA tournament has been incredibly undervalued. And some people feel that the basketball side also a little bit undervalued as far as in comparison with football. I think the raw numbers are in most media deals with college conferences, 80% of the deal is based on football, 18% based on basketball, and 20% or 2% based on maybe the rest of the Olympic sports. That equation, I think, that's going to change. I think you're never going to get to 50-50, but 70-30 in that range. And especially if you have a national brand, which Gonzaga is a national brand, I really think that could be a cornerstone to helping lift the value on the basketball side.
It's interesting you say undervalued, and obviously compared to football, it is what it is. Football's king. What I find fascinating in being in the Big Ten this year, I've done a lot of games for Big Ten and Big Ten Network, is learning a new conference and just how big that is. But conference realignment obviously is a thing. And so I've done mostly the four schools, USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, that joined the Big Ten, and how that dynamic kind of felt. Like early on, we felt like outsiders. We really did. And I think because people didn't know us, producers, directors, people, they just didn't know us. And I think we've all done a good job, the group of us that are doing a lot of these games. But I guess what I'm getting to is, now that, let's say I'm in the Big Ten, I'm part of the Big Ten, the real thing in college basketball is the NCAA tournament. And so with all this conference realignment, is there going to be residual effect on the NCAA tournament, or does it even matter in your estimation?
Well, in my estimation, there may be a push by some of the conferences that feel they have leverage to try to maybe
Name two.
I'm learning how to speak, Ted. So perhaps expanding the tournament so they can get all their teams in guaranteed, for instance.
Right.
And how much are the Big Two going to be able to assert their leverage over the rest of college sports? I think that's the biggest question for the next 5 or 6. Well, definitely in 5 or 6 years, that will be the biggest question. How much are the Big Two going to be able to assert their leverage? I know there's discussions right now with on the football side with the CFP, and we'll see how that turns out. But I think ultimately, Don, people care. The NCAA tournament's a nice equalizer, because we've seen what happens in the NCAA tournament. The big dominant conferences haven't dominated in the Final Four. There's been outliers consistently. So I think that's what people love about the NCAA tournament. Everybody has a fair shot. So I would hate to see that part of the NCAA tournament go away, because I think ultimately that will seriously hurt the NCAA tournament.
So stay with basketball here, because I think I mentioned this with Don last week. About 10 days ago, I made a rare venture into SEC territory. I had a chance for about a 15-minute one-on-one with Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC. He made it very clear when he took his job in 2016, 3 SEC teams were in March Madness, the men's side. 3. As of this morning, Bracket Boy has 12. Sankey said he thinks they could get 13 in. But his point was, since I started in this job, our schools have invested in basketball. And Don, this is what we talked a lot about this the last couple of years. I think that's where the Pac lost its way a little bit the last few years, was the focus became so football-centric, men's basketball suffered. And there becomes the point to me going forward, as this conference reboots, schools that have had success in basketball, i.e. Gonzaga, hopefully drive that there's a commitment to both men's and women's. This is not gender specific, both men's and women's basketball, to do what the SEC just went through. Not a question, I understand. A little bit more of a soapbox statement.
Well, but I can from some of the meetings I've been in, there's certainly at a lot of our schools a not an equal weight, but a much greater emphasis on basketball than some schools. The basketball has gotten a little unbalanced. But I feel like people understand that in this new conference, basketball is going to be something to showcase for sure. And again, I'll go back to the environments. It just seems like some of the, you and I, this isn't a shot, but you and I were at UCLA for the Bill Walton game against Ohio State. And it didn't feel like there was a lot of energy in there. The most energy was in the timeouts where they did the tributes to Bill. And by the way, UCLA marketing, hats off. You guys did an amazing job with what you put together for Bill in those timeouts. But it just didn't have the energy of, it didn't, I just think some of the smaller schools with the chip on their shoulder, maybe their student bodies and fans bring a little more energy. And I think that's, we're sort of, this new Pac, I think might be coined the outsider brand a little bit. And we've got a little bit of a chip on our shoulder. And I think that energizes the fan base and especially the student body. So the environments are going to be great.
So
Don, what are you seeing in your Big Ten, Don, this year? Because you're seeing these schools.
Yeah.
I would think they're leading examples of commitment.
Well,
right?
the one that sticks out is I did Illinois at Washington this year. And if there was 10,000 people there, it was 7,000 Illinois fans. and so in Washington, not in Illinois. And so, yeah, it's just bigger. But here's something, Michael, that I was talking to one of the ADs of a school, not one of the four that joined the Big Ten, one of the original Big Ten schools. And I was talking to him for a while before a game, and he just told me, he said, this isn't sustainable. And he was kind of referring to the four schools going to the Big Ten with the travel. A couple of the coaches have said we can never win the regular season in the Big Ten because the original schools only come out west once. We have to go there 3 or 4 times. And so it's just too hard with the travel and everything to win. So I guess my question to you is, in 5 or 6 years, whenever this media rights deal's up, the Big Ten's media rights deal, do you foresee, could it be that the 4 schools come back to the old or the new Pac-12? Could Cal and Stanford lead the ACC and come back? Like, could the Pac-12 become an 18-team league at some point just because of geography?
I think number one, the big question is what will happen to football in that 2030, 31 range? Because it's conceivable that football will, and it's not a new theory, this has been out there, it's conceivable football will branch off and become its own entity. And if that's the case, then I would certainly think there would be an opportunity and maybe a desire for basketball and the other Olympic sports to come back to more geographical sanity.
Mm-hmm.
I'll use a TED phrase, but I think if I was forced to speculate, I would say Cal and Stanford probably makes a little more sense because obviously the money for the Big Ten 4 is a little more. And I also think, I think ultimately it's not just the travel, it's what does the travel do to student health and welfare, which should be something people think about. I'm not saying they're not, but I don't think it was forefront in the decision making.
No.
I'll let you. So that may become forefront in the decision making, especially as athletes get more empowered, because a lot of these athletes are getting paid, and this is shifting from a little more just student athlete to more professional based, and your health and welfare becomes more important if you're trying to build your career and everything else. So I think ultimately there's going to be a little more emphasis on health and welfare than there was in the initial decision making.
So Don, I've suggested to SVP Molinari that he let our brilliant commissioner, Teresa Gould, know she needs to reserve 2 parking spots outside HQ in San Ramon for Cal and Stanford. Just me. I think it's inevitable. I don't know when, but I think it's inevitable. And I'll just say, Don, you've heard it doing games at USC where Eric Musselman has talked about it. Just last week, I heard it from Kate Pay, the new women's coach at Stanford. They played at Virginia last Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, which is just insane that would be scheduled. And of course, I'm guessing it's TV driven. They did have a charter flight home that had to stop to refuel twice. 2 stops to refuel. So a 6 p.m. Eastern time game. They got back to campus at 6 a.m. Monday Pacific time. That's gaining 3 hours. That's not sustainable. Just not.
The February jet stream will get you every time, Ted. You got to plan for that.
And so let me take that because you made Don led into this beautifully, Michael. Gonzaga coming in, which again to me was, I think everyone would suggest, was just a massive home run hit for the new conference. Everything I'm understanding is that Teresa Gould, who did the brilliant job of going to Gonzaga in person and making the deal done with the Gonzaga leadership, but really sold student athlete welfare, what's best for student athletes. And I understand that term has lost its meaning in many, many places. But in this case, I'm told, and you can speak to this, that's what Teresa did to connect with the Gonzaga leadership.
Yeah, I think I'll use Teresa's words. She wanted to make a transformational connection with Gonzaga rather than a transactional connection. And I think that was well received by that school, because they've had a multitude of opportunities to leave the WCC and go somewhere else. And I think they felt Teresa leading our conference was going to allow them to, that's going to be the best fit for them. And that made, I don't think, they did not make their decision solely based upon finances. They made their decision based upon other factors, kind of the opposite maybe of what we were speaking about earlier. They prioritized health, welfare, geography above necessarily the bottom line. So I think that was a major, I can't speak for them, but I feel like that was a major factor in their decision looking back on it. And, I think they're going to be very happy with the decision they made. And obviously it's going to do so much for our basketball conference moving forward. I mean, it just was, we had a lot of wins, but that was the huge win of what's gone on since Pac-12 2.0, I guess. That's going to be something we look back on, and that was a major moment for this new conference.
And they have to compete with the dynasty that is Utah State.
I was just thinking, if I don't get my brother on here, he's going to kill. So for those who don't know, yes, I think it's been teased, but my brother Paul is the chief of staff for the Utah State basketball team. He has been with Jared Calhoun since the Fairmont State days. So that was Joe Mazzulla was on that staff way back in Fairmont, West Virginia. So it was Jared Calhoun, the head coach, my brother, Joe Mazzulla, all at Fairmont. Paul and Jared went to Youngstown State, and then they just took the job this year at Utah State. So I've been to, you mentioned St. Mary's, and no one can, the juggernaut they are. I was at the game. Utah State won at St. Mary's in December, which was definitely going to help Utah State. Hopefully they've run into two terrible games, their last two games. So hopefully that St. Mary's win at St. Mary's will be a little bit of an insurance policy for them.
Michael,
the other thing I got to get in, Jared Calhoun was a player, a walk-on player at Cleveland State, where my brother was an assistant. The head coach, the great Rolly Massimino.
Oh, yeah.
And Jared and I played horse once, and he probably beat me 19 out of 20 times, but I think I got him one time. So I wanted to get that in. He was a pretty good shooter.
You've told me, Michael, the about Utah State and all the success they've had, and I didn't really realize, Craig Smith and Ryan Odom, then Danny Sprinkle, and now yes, those guys and Jared Calhoun, these guys are all proven to be really good head coaches, but it's got to be about the place too to have that much success there at Utah State.
Intimidating atmosphere, because they have something that's rare. They have a buy-in from the community and a buy-in from the student body, and they're both really passionate. And it's an intimidating place to play. I don't know if you guys have done a game there, but it is. They're right on you. I mean, if you look under each of the baskets, there's about, from the stanchion to the first row is about 4 inches. So it is cramped and very tight, and it is it's a really intimidating place to play. But again, the community's behind them, and obviously I think because ultimately right now we all know getting players is a lot about what you can pay them through the NIL and the collective. But I think the tiebreaker, if the money's about the same, is what kind of environment, am I playing in front of a passionate crowd every night? I think that can be a separator. And I think that might help a lot of our schools coming in that have great environments. I think that ultimately can be a little bit of separator. Though, Don, I got to get a little nuts and bolts with you, though. You said something, because I'm like, Melanie, my wife, asked me, what is going on with Utah State? They've had 2 bad losses. I said, I think people they have this kind of matchup zone, type 2-3, 1-3-1 matchup zone. I think the second time around, the schools have figured it out a little bit, and I think they've seen enough tape now. So I think the Utah State defense is being solved a little bit in conference. I don't think as you move into postseason play in the NCAA tournament, I think it's still going to be a weapon for them. But I think that's one of the reasons. And that's something, Don, you always mentioned, that second time around, people have seen you in the scouting report. They start to learn some things. So I think that is currently maybe the issue. They have Air Force at home on Saturday, who's Air Force has struggled this year. So hopefully they'll get back on track.
Yeah. All right. So, Michael, let's pivot this to the business part, which is really your job. That's why you have the title you do. Talk about Pac-12 Enterprises. I'm assuming if you're watching this, you probably know who John Wilner and John Canzano are. They do a lot of terrific work writing about it. But give us an idea of what Pac-12 Enterprises has meant, what it's meaning to Oregon State and Washington State, and what it's been like as a sales pitch, bluntly, to attract the new schools.
Well, quick history lesson. Pac-12 Networks, which you two worked for, and as I did, 12 years starting in 2012. They decided we were going to move across the bay from downtown San Francisco, where the original building was, out to San Ramon, California in 2023. As the plans were laid, the building was finished. Everything collapsed in the conference. The timing was very strange. So there was a significant investment made in the equipment in that building and the building itself by all 12 schools. So I think in the shortest version of it, Oregon State and Washington State ended up owning a facility that they basically each paid 1/12 for, yet they owned it fully between the two. So that seems like a pretty good investment, that a debt-free investment that you now own the entire thing when you only owned 1/12 of it. Seemed like a good opportunity to try to take advantage of, which Scott Barnes and the Washington State administration decided that they were going to do that. So they made that plan, and now it's what are we doing kind of between now and 2026? We are producing all of the events for Washington State and Oregon State, 175 or so. I would say if you watch ESPN Plus, I'm going to say that our productions are in the 99th percentile of what you see on ESPN Plus. Yeah. Proud of that. We also produced all the football for CW, which basically they paid us to produce the games. We did all the home games for Washington State, Oregon State. We did a studio show for CW, both our shows and the ACC, which was interesting. And then it's how do we supplement that 180 or so commitment with outside clients? And that's what there's no one in the television industry who has not heard from me since June, probably multiple times. And but we've had, a handful of things. I think we're now up to 21 outside clients doing different events. Everything from the Golden State Warriors came in for a preseason game, which was our relationship with NBC Bay Area is growing. We're going to be helping them with some A's and Giants spring training. That's pretty exciting. A couple things for the summer, which aren't quite signed, but we're excited about some actually local teams that do some summer events. And then we've produced events for the WCC. We just finished up Big 12 swimming and diving, which was really turned out great. Excited about hopefully a new building relationship with them. And I could go on and on, but it's.
I'll stop you. I'll stop you because Don, I walked in last week. There was a bullfight on, and another screen had a tractor pull. So Michael's doing his job. Yeah. This is an asset that Michael's working for the Pac-12.
Why were we asked to announce the bull riding, Ted?
You guys are busy, yes, bull ride. Yeah, well, I think the nice thing, just kind of getting a little TV nuts and bolts. The two things we have going for us, we have, as announcers, when you're doing a Remy, which is we do the production from San Ramon, but the event can be anywhere in the country and theoretically the world, the way the connections are now. But you two as announcers, you're on site. When you look down at the monitors on a Pac-12 Enterprises show, your delay is about 1/5 of a second to get the signal back to us, back to you. I know others haven't solved that as well. No. And it really it's difficult to do. Yeah. It's difficult to do productions when what you're seeing isn't what the people at home are seeing. It's disconnected. So we're very proud of, and I gotta have to mention the great Howie Chung, our connectivity superstar, is just an amazing, brilliant technician who basically the Pac-12 kind of developed this, and then the pandemic hit, and everybody kind of copied what we were doing. But I still think we do it better than anybody. And honestly, I think we do it at a pretty good value compared to most.
Well, Don, I think what we're learning, and this is credit to Teresa Gould and to the two schools, Oregon State and Washington State, as Michael said, was while other university presidents were running away from an asset and then incurring their own new expenses, which of course they didn't think about. Teresa and the two schools recognized that what was built, as Michael said, brand new, state of the art, was an asset, and they're using it to generate income. Which again, that's the truth. That's where we are.
And Michael, that's why the first question I asked you was going back to the start, because it seemed like you were in position, just nobody knew it with the facility and everything.
Sometimes the best ideas are right in front of you, Don, and it for whatever reason you don't see them. But I hope in 6 months I'm going to say, wow, I can't believe we didn't see this. Because the other nice thing about this place is, yes, producing sports television, but how can we do other things like the A's and Giants I mentioned? We're actually not even producing the events for them. We're simply providing a high-speed pipe for them to get from, because they're Arizona, they're not connected there with the spring training, how we figured out how to get from Arizona, our building, to 3rd Street in San Francisco where they're located. And we're like almost like the cable company for them. We're just providing a pipe. So that's just another revenue stream that it was like, wow, we can do that. And we may do something similar to that for the NCAA swimming that Ted's going to be working on next month up in, where's the name of that? I always forget the name of the
Federal Way, Washington.
Yes. So
Adam Gordon's backyard. So let me say, Michael, going forward, now I understand your position. You can't get into details here. We get that. But as the conference closes in on a new television deal, is the Pac-12 headquarter what you're running? Is that going to be, because no conference can offer that, right? You're the first conference that can offer an in-house one-stop shopping production facility. Is that going to be part of the new media deal?
Let me answer. You set me up, so it is definitely being factored into the discussions. That's about all I can say.
Next stop, politics for Molinari.
I got a lot better, Don. I was not very political about 8 months ago. I've gotten much better.
I'm still not.
It's obvious. It's certainly yes. It's certainly an option that doesn't exist elsewhere. So it's being discussed, and I think I'm hoping. I think on the other part of that is a lot of networks now, they call it packaging. They use other companies to produce their events. So there's a lot of that going on. What better outside entity to produce the Pac-12 events who are going to care about the quality and the storytelling of Pac-12 events than Pac-12 enterprises themselves? And that's sort of not even a financial consideration, but the people that care about their conference, if they're doing the television, then you got to have they have a track record of 12 years and 10,000 events doing this, and they're definitely going to care about the quality of what they're doing. So I think that's another factor besides just cost.
And just to address one other issue, Michael, and again, I understand your position. We understand your position on this. But look, this conference very proudly, yes, Bill, proclaimed itself Conference of Champions, which meant broad-based athletic programs, both genders. As the conference rebuilds, just give us an idea what part of conversation that is. How many sports, what the schools presently offer, the schools that are coming in, because I don't even know what they all offer and what can be offered going forward.
I think we're gonna reduce a little bit, but don't take these numbers 100% but I believe in the previous pack, the number of sports sponsored was 24, with a little bit more on the women's side than on the men's side. I think that might be reduced by 5, so it's not going to be a dramatic slash. We're definitely going to still be embracing the Olympic sports, both men's and women's, for sure.
All right, so Michael, because you've been a part of this forever, you're going to stick around for a little story time, aren't you?
Oh, is Don telling the story?
Don, of course, no. Don has set it up. This is our season finale. Don has saved his best story for last, and I'm going to lead in with just a slight little mini soapbox. Having done a women's game this past week it was Georgia Tech Stanford. It's only the second women's game I've done since COVID, But I'm going to tell you, the women have it right. The quarters system is awesome. It's awesome. The game moves, the structure's better. The men need to do this.
I agree.
Don, your thoughts?
I totally
Don?
agree. And just resetting the fouls. And so it's just, like the St. Mary's game against Oregon State, St. Mary's didn't shoot a free throw in the first half and shot 23 in the second half. Like, this time of year, like I did a game the other day, I forget who it was, but one of the teams was in the bonus with 14 minutes to go in the half. So they probably shot 30 free throws in the second half too. So anyway, I agree with
fans don't like, Don. Two things fans don't like: watching people shoot free throws and watching referees do needless reviews to cover. And it's not their fault.
No,
but we've become this review should be about fixing egregious errors, and it's so morphed away from that.
They should be good enough to not to have to go to the review all the time. Like, trust yourself, guys. Trust yourself that you made the right call.
And believe the people above you have your back.
Right.
And I think that's a factor too.
Yeah.
Somebody told me the other day that there was an ACC men's game last week. And of course, this factors into the television world. The last 4 minutes took 25.
Oh, yeah.
Real-time minutes to play. The last 4 minutes of the game. That is unacceptable.
It happens all the time, though, Ted. There's example after example of the last 4 minutes taking – I've heard 35 minutes for the last 4 minutes.
Hey, Don, what do you think? I've kind of thrown this out, and I'll give the great Len Elmore a little credit for this, too. Something we talked about like 20 years ago after a West Virginia game in some bar in West Virginia. And it was one of those games that dragged out and the fouls. I don't know what the number is. I was saying it's 10. If you're not within 10 and you foul, the other team can take it out of bounds. Maybe it's 8. But earn the right to get somebody to the foul line. If the score is too big, you got to just play defense.
Yeah.
But just a foul when the game's out of reach. Like, I don't mind a foul that's a 3-point game. Like, maybe it's 7. If it's more than 7, the team with the ball, if they get fouled, can decide to take it out of bounds. Yeah. Do you think that would solve some of the late fouling?
I think, but you're giving players too much credit too, Michael, that they're smart enough to know. There's a lot of times they're fouling and they're not even trying to foul. They're just fouling because their basketball IQ isn't high enough. Like, literally.
But time and score. Time and score. I mean, but if you can take the ball out, so, in that scenario, St. Mary's, you just take the ball out of bounds and inbounds again. So even if it would speed it up for sure.
I think there should be also, there's only a certain amount of reviews, or you just go to the challenge system like other sports, and you got a certain amount of challenges. And that way it takes a little bit off the officials too. Like, they won't go review it because they can't. And then they trust themselves a little bit more because they can't review it until a coach says, I want to challenge that and review it.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I kind of got on the soapbox.
Getting crowded. The soapbox is getting.
Drew, you better get your editor out.
It's getting crowded on my soapbox. I love it. But I'll finish by saying, so here's the thought I had because, you've heard me rail about forever. The most inexplicable rule in sport right now is the 1-on-1. So I break the rule by fouling, but you're the team that's penalized because you have to go make a foul shot to get another one. It makes no sense. But when I was a kid, yes, I was a kid once, the NBA's rule at a certain point was 3 to make 2. When I was a kid, the NBA had a 3 to make 2. So in my view, you want to do college right. When you get to the bonus, it's an automatic 2. The double bonus is 3 to make 2.
So you want more foul shots.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, you just added 35 minutes to the game.
I want to discourage fouling.
Because every single player,
that goes back to Don's point.
Every single player is going to take 3 to make 2. Nobody's going to go 2 for 2 ever.
Oh my gosh. Folks, this is what makes basketball fun, is the soapbox and these kinds of conversations. It's truly why I love doing this with Don this year and having this conversation. All right, so Michael gets a chance to sit and listen, as do I, as Don tees up our season finale of Don's Storytime.
Well, this one, actually, people know about. I've told it a bunch. It's been actually, Pat Williams, the old president of the Orlando Magic, wrote a book about Michael Jordan years ago, and he heard about this story, and this story was actually in his book. And it speaks to the greatness and the competitive spirit of Michael Jordan. So going back when I was playing, even when I started at UCLA, there's pickup games in the men's gym for years and years and years, Monday through Thursday, 3:00, like clockwork every year. All pros and UCLA guys. So if you were in town or you lived here in the off season, you would be there playing. And it went on forever. And Magic, everybody would show up and play. Well, when Michael Jordan agreed to film Space Jam, he came out to LA obviously to film, but he couldn't play at 3:00. So Warner Brothers built him a huge bubble with a NBA court, weight room, everything, so that when he was done filming for the day, he could train on the court or weight room, whatever it is. So when that started, he sent some of his people over to UCLA during the day trying to recruit guys to come play at night. And so that started, and because I was kind of on my own routine and what I like doing, I didn't want to go there at night. I wanted to play at 3 and be done with all my stuff. So I didn't go initially. But I'd heard that there was a lot of guys going over there. And, it was kind of one of those seniority things, how long you've been in the league, if you got on and all. I think I was in my 3rd or 4th year at that point. And so one night I went, and a lot of guys, there was probably 3 or 4 teams. So if you didn't win, you had to sit and then get back on. But it was competitive. Michael always raised the level. It's the same when Magic came to the men's gym, which wasn't often, but when he did, the level went way up. And the S-talking went way up as well. And so this one night, the first night I went, I forget who I was playing with. I forget who he was playing with, but he was guarding me, but loosely. Oh, and by the way, backing up, whenever Magic came to the men's gym pickup games, he never lost, not one time. And in fact, I fouled him. He called 13 straight fouls on game point. Magic Johnson. I was guarding him. Probably 4 of them were fouls. And the ironic part is on the last one, I did foul him, but he threw in like a 25-foot hook shot. So it didn't matter. And I even asked Magic after, I said, so when it gets to be 6-6, we're playing to 7-by-1. Should we just walk off? He's like, yeah, you should. I'm like, well, at least now I know. I've wasted 20 minutes of my life, you calling fouls. But anyways, so anyways, going to Michael, so he's guarding me, but loosely, not guarding. He's like team defender. And he always took, like Magic, he took whatever 4 players. He didn't care. He like a couple college guys, first-year rookies or whatever, and he'd always win. And so that night, it was the last game of the night. He's guarding me, and I got loose because, for whatever reason, again, loosely guarding me. And I hit 6. We played to 9 there for some reason. Had 6 of the 9 buckets, but more importantly, had the game winner. Like when it got to game point, like you probably weren't getting it, but somehow, some way, I got the shot off and made it. And I remember after the game, I'm walking to the other end where my stuff was, and I was going to ice my knees and everything. I'm like, I can't believe we just won. Like, Michael lost. That's crazy. And I didn't really think much of it. So I'm taking off my shoes and doing my stuff, and he comes over. And I knew Michael just said, hey, hey, what's up kind of thing. I never had spent any time talking to him. And he came over. And he goes, hey, because it was Thursday, so there was no games till the next week. And he goes, hey, Don, are you coming back next week? And I was like, actually, I'm going to Japan next week. I was going to Japan to do a couple of clinics or something. And I'm like, no, but I'll be back. He's like, yeah, make sure you come back. Like, kind of like being friendly, like, because it's his place. And I'm like, wow, that was pretty cool. And Michael say that, like, wants me to come back and everything. Like, but, and I thought he was just trying to keep players coming so that he would have pickup games. And so didn't think anything of it. And so I go to Japan next week. I came back 3 weeks later. It was a Monday. First game of the night. My 5 and his 5. And his 5, there was 4 other guys on his 5 that should have been guarding me. He walks on the court and goes, I got MacLean. I did not touch the ball the entire game. Did not touch it. Not shoot it. Did not touch it. And I walked away from that after that game that night saying, this is why this guy's the greatest player ever, because a meaningless pickup game, I somehow wronged him by making that game winner and scoring those buckets, that he had to exact revenge when nobody even noticed it. If I hadn't told that story, no one would even know that happened. But it blew my mind that mattered so much to him that he had to exact it. And people underestimate. Michael Jordan was one of the strongest players I ever played against. Like Shaq strong. If he didn't want you to catch the ball, you were not catching it. And so that's what happened. But really, it just speaks to the greatness and the competitive spirit of Michael Jordan and why, to me, he still is the greatest that ever played.
If you're telling that story, Don, the only thing I'm thinking is, why didn't you say when you won the game, say "good game, Mike"?
Yeah.
Like LeBradford
Yeah,
Smith.
yeah. I knew better than that.
That's tremendous. I'll just postscript because that's a great story, Don. I worked. This is back in the '90s. I worked with a guy who's no longer with us, sadly, but he was a former player and he traveled with the Bulls. And he said it was routine. Card game on every flight. And Michael Jordan demanded rookies played in the card game. And he thought nothing of taking a rookie for 5 figures.
Oh, no.
And back then, in 30 years ago, the salaries were still nice, but 5 figures for a rookie 30 years ago, Don, that meant something. Michael Jordan had no problem doing that. Yeah. Competitive.
Mean competitive, but he got to where he wanted to go.
That rings mean, doesn't it?
Well, and I think that's why, Michael, maybe you can add to this, why I think a lot of people The Last Dance was really well done and really well put together. But I think it took people to the place where, man, this competitive guy, that's different. That level of competitiveness was different back then than it is now, I think.
Yeah, it's his. Well, maybe part of that's what Ted alluded to. The money's a bit different now than it was. Now, Michael Jordan wasn't worrying about money, but some were. The other thing, The Last Dance you bring up, but I think is when I watched that, what jumped out at me beyond a look inside Michael's head, which was fascinating, was the score of those games in the finals. They were like 80s and 92 to 86, and no one was complaining. Oh, there's not a lot of scoring now, and not to mention the number of 3-pointers that were probably shot in those games. So it just, to me, even though it was physical and lower scoring, it was a heck of a lot better brand of basketball. Yeah. Can I say one other thing before? A, thanks for having me. B, I appreciate both of you guys helping us do this to help support as we're kind of doing the bridge of the pack to the pack. So we definitely appreciate your participation, and certainly Adam and Adam Gordon and Andrew Castellano with their amazing work on this show. It's been great, and it's been not only seen its entirety, but it's really helped us in half times and everything else. So thanks to all 4 of you for your hard work on this.
It's been fun.
Well, it's been a ton of fun. And Michael, we thank you and Eric Lacey for giving us this forum. For me to swap stories with Don again has just been great to talk basketball. And I'm glad you jumped the gun because Adam Gordon is still the greatest hockey announcer who's not calling hockey this year. So somebody please hire him. And Drew, I want an invitation to Thanksgiving next year, okay? I've seen the pictures of the turkey. Every year Molinari shows me pictures of the turkey.
Drew, I demand we end this pod with a shot of the bacon-covered turkey because there'd be nothing better than that.
And so thank you. And truly, we thank Teresa Gould, truly, for her leadership, for having the foresight to bring you on, Michael, and to use, again, Pac-12 Enterprises as an asset, and for getting these great schools to come in. That's wonderful. Don, this has been a ton of fun. Are you going to the Big Ten tournament?
I am. I will be there next week doing some studio. I have 2 games this week and then that to finish up. And, this has been a lot of fun. And Adam and Drew have been awesome. The final edit always looks amazing. And, Michael, thanks for the opportunity. And I say we run it back again next year, Ted, even if they don't let us. We'll just do it on our own.
Don, I'm just telling you right now, don't get too comfortable in the Big Ten, okay? Listen, look at the swag we have for you when we get the Pac-12 back going again. Come on. Maybe I'll call LeVar and see if he still has some clothing available. All right, everybody. Listen, this has been a ton of fun. Again, thank you for joining us. And very serious thank you to Adam and to Drew because, as my son famously told me, Dad, you have a tough job. You show up, talk, and go home. And he could not have been more right. It's the people like Adam and Drew that make this happen for folks like Don and myself. So thank you all. Don, safe travels down the road. Enjoy
Thanks,
March.
Ted.